There you go. And just to prove it.
Okay.
So brilliant. But now I'm just going to keep an eye out on Messenger. Sometimes people message and they can't get through or whatever, but we're going to carry on. So today is going to be about trust, and hopefully if I share my screen just now, you should be able to see the very definition of the word trust on your screen just now, and hopefully that that conveys all sorts of kind of imagery that we kind of associate with trust. So hopefully you're with me on that. Not too difficult so far. Right. So what's next? No, we're not going to bother doing that. Oh yeah, last week. So last week we're talking about gatekeepers. Now, I don't particularly like that term, but it works for this conversation. So gatekeepers, their primary responsibility, obviously, is in, let me just come off and mute, come off and share. Gatekeepers, their primary responsibility is to block their bosses' time, to protect their bosses' time. So they're just doing their job.
Yeah.
But the reason I think sales has got a reputational hit over, well, for a very long time, is because, you know, people try all sorts of tricks to try and I mean tricks in terms of deceit, to try and get past the gatekeeper. And the conclusion that we came to last week, and I'll be happy to take any feedback that you want to offer, Rebecca, is that you've got to make a friend of the gatekeeper. And if you're good on the phone and you've got a sort of trustworthy, and that's what we're talking about today, trustworthy manner, you'll differentiate yourself from 80% of the rest of the people that are phoning up trying to get through to the MD or whomever it might be. And you can make a friend of the gatekeeper, and that can be a really powerful sort of allyship or friendship, and they can, you know, kind of give you information. They're never going to do anything confidential, I'm sure, but they can, you know, kind of help you move around the account, that you know what's going on, what's on the boss's mind, all of those things. So that seemed to work well for participants.
How do you keep that genuine though? Like, I mean, don't they sort of sense that you're doing it just for a purpose, you know?
Well, I think by being upfront, actually, you know that we talked. That's a really insightful.
I'd be more comfortable being upfront. I don't like trying to wheedle my way into anywhere. It just feels.
No, that's right. Well, I've got a list of things that we came up with as takeaways last week. And number 5 was, and you'll get access to this, number 5 was be humble. There you go. Just let someone in. Number 5 was be humble. In fact, Hardip, who's just joining the call, was on last week. And authenticity is the order of the day. Be yourself, because actually, for anyone with any experience in the workplace, they will know when someone's being authentic.
Yeah, exactly.
They just will, won't they? In particular, people that are guarding VIPs or MDs or something like that. So that's good. So welcome, Natalia, and to Hardip as well. Feel free to come off the camera or not, as you're kind of comfortable. I'm just wrapping up from last week around gatekeepers, and also focus on the goal as well, being upfront, what it is you're really after. They'll almost certainly send you somewhere else because that's their job as well. But you can ask questions about who's that person, what do they do, can you give me tips, make them your friend, all of those things. And we also talked about a drop, I don't know if you know this phrase, Rebecca, but a drop of honey is worth a gallon of vinegar. So
No,
just right, okay, yeah. Okay, so it's just, you know, being nice to people, which I think after the pandemic has been really, really important. Humanity, kindness, professional courtesy, you might call that. If you're nice to people, you're likely to get more out of them. than if you're just got loads of bullying or nastiness, which yeah, I'm just not that into. Okay, right. So you'll be pleased to see. So now one of the no, he's not going to get a chance to be here today, but Mehdi, who is an IT consultant in Germany, asked a question last week, which led me into putting this together this week on trust. So the question he asked was, he often gets to see customers where their IT is outsourced to a third party, I beg your pardon, and the customer often asks Mehdi to speak to their partner. The partners are quite technical, because they love speeds and feeds and this kind of processor and all of that kind of thing, but they miss out the business value, the sort of so what part of that conversation, and they're missing that connection, and that's, I think, where Mehdi comes in. He can give them that sort of, this is what it means for your business, as opposed to buy an Apple A7 chip for your Mac machine or whatever it happens to be. So he gets that business connection. So the gatekeepers often feel threatened by opening the door for Mehdi, because they probably fear that he's going to take business away from them or take over the relationship, threaten their revenue streams or something like that. And at the heart of it is trust. And so we can, any hints that Mehdi asked, so I'm just going to answer this. This is about trust. And we're going to go on to trust. But the two things that come out of it, I think, is being transparent. Do you remember, Rebecca, only a couple of minutes ago, you said about being upfront about what it is you want? You know, we're not trying to deceive anyone. This is really what we want to do. And there's no risk to you. This is all we're going to do. Your relationship's going to be intact, and all of those things. We're not coming to take anything over or not. So I think it's transparency and honesty and everything, integrity in everything that you kind of do. So I think that was the part of it. And so that's what Mehdi's got to concentrate on. So can I just ask you, Natalia and Hardit, you've joined, you're on mute, and that's absolutely fine. We're talking about trust. Are there any brands that come to mind today where you feel, I really trust that brand? Are there any that you want to drop in chat or come off of mute? And Hardip, okay, fantastic. Hardip says Apple. I trust Apple. Okay, and Natalia, thanks for doing that. Are there any brands that you would trust, Natalia, where they do something and I absolutely trust what they do? What about Rebecca? I'm going to put you on the spot now, Rebecca.
I trust Amazon in the sense of sales and their customer service, because you can return things easily.
Amazon. Okay, right. No, I've not experienced that side of Amazon, but you're right. In fact, just last night I had to order a little cable, quite an unusual cable. I didn't want to go traipsing all around York looking for one. I can just pick up my app, ding, 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 order it. Next day, it's here. It's amazing. And in that respect, that part of the brand, I absolutely trust Apple. Didn't even have to Amazon. I've got an iPhone, so it kind of suggests that I trust. It suggests that I trust Apple. But that was a really good example. Motorola, gosh, that's a brand I haven't heard from a while. But Motorola, absolutely. Samsung, we have Samsung TVs around the house, and Epson for your printer. Yes, they're brands that you don't even have to think about. You just trust them, and I think that's really important. I'm going to do a couple of slides on share screen now, just to kind of give you an indication of especially Rebecca, you're joining us for the masterclasses in a couple of weeks' time. So this guy, I really like what this guy says, Siva, sales, because at the end of the day, that's what we're all engaged in, Hardip and Natalia, by the way. is an accountant, but we're all selling. We believe we're all selling all of the time. So, but this guy, Siva, who's the CEO of Mansa, says sales is not about selling anymore per se, but it's about building trust. Number one, building trust, and about educating. So, Rebecca, you're in the logistics business, if I understand that
With Martin, yeah.
correctly. And sometimes, so you're a professional salesperson when it comes to, you're used to selling your logistics services, but the person that you're talking to may not be experienced at buying logistics services. And so there's a bit of education coming. In fact, Hardip is in the education business, sells specifically to the education sector, just to let you know, I've not gone completely doolally Hardip, but well, you know, some would argue maybe. Personal story time. A long time ago in a different world, I had the, and it's probably everything that gives sales a poor reputation. I had the misfortune to try and buy some double glazing for a house I was restoring at the time, and I'm going back 20 years. This guy came round our house, sat in an armchair, which really bothered me. I didn't invite him to sit down. I just thought he was going to look around the house, but he came and plonked himself. He was there 3 hours, and he wouldn't. Every time we said, well, we need these windows, this type, this design, all the rest of it, he wouldn't negotiate with us. Every time we said, no, we don't want to pay that price, he would have to phone his manager. Now, I didn't hear anyone at the end of the phone, so he might have just been completely making this up and speaking to no one. And you know, when we all know each other a bit more, I might tell you a funny story about that, but another time. So he must have made three or four calls to a so-called manager, and I was getting really frustrated and irate by this. I couldn't hear any voice coming out of his earpiece or anything like that, and it was like I was being patronized to death. And so there was a lack of transparency there. I didn't know where the pricing was coming from, didn't know how he was coming, and actually in the end I got so frustrated, as politely as I could gather, by the end of the night, I escorted him off out of the house. We didn't buy anything. The next person that came round, what must have been the owner of the company, he was in and out within about 25 minutes with a check for the double glazing. With totally, it could not have been. It was like night and day. The transformation between, you know, someone that was really, really trustworthy and someone that, you know, just could not command trust in any way. So I'm going to give you this example now, and you may remember it and you may not. So this guy, Jeremy Paxman, public figure, probably may remember him from University Challenge or not. And he did an article, and it was in the Times or something like that. He did an article around anyway, a particular item of clothing. We talked about brands just now, and the brand that he talked about was run by this guy. So Stuart Rose was the chair of Marks and Spencer. Now, maybe I'm just showing my my reserved roots here, but Marks and Spencer for me is a trusted brand for the most part. They can all have off days, but for the most part is a trusted brand. And they were talking about underpants. You might remember that conversation or not, but it became headlines, I kid you not, certainly in the Guardian for 2 or 3 days, and it gets to the very heart of trust. He put all his faith and trust in Marks and Spencer underpants for decades, and all of a sudden, and I apologize. Actually, I don't apologize. This is a real story. So, but Rebecca, probably not what you're expecting to hear on your first. We don't always talk about underpants, but we do talk about trust an awful lot. Anyway, so he really trusts Marks and Spencer for his underpants, wrote an open letter to Sir Stuart Rose, and it appeared in a newspaper somewhere, saying, your products are becoming substandard now. They don't give me the support that I demanded that they've given me over the last 20 years. So Sir Stuart Rose, who really cares about his brand, obviously, picked this issue up, went to his clothing people, whoever it was that ran that department, and said, give me a response to this. Anyway, without going into the gory details, men in later life need more support than they did 20 years ago, and you can perhaps Google that afterwards, and feeling hot under the collar already. But anyway, that is an example of trust, and it's a real example, and he trusted the brand. Sir Stuart Rose did what he said he would do. He would come back with an answer. You may not like the answer, but that is the answer. And I think that's really important. So that quality of trust was fed through. He did what he said he was going to do, and that's really, really important. Okay, so it turns out there is actually a trust quadrant, and the reason I put this in halfway through this sort of discussion is to bring out some of the points that I think I've already referenced. We saw one of those CEOs that talked about sincerity, and Rebecca, just before Natalia and Hardip joined, we talked about authenticity, didn't we? We talked about being, come on, confirm that we did.
Yes,
we talked about, thank you very much. We talked about authenticity and being authentic, particularly on a cold call or something like that, where it's the very first engagement that you've had potentially with an account. And we talked about authenticity, and that's reflected here in the bottom, the x-axis here on sincerity, being sincere, being truthful, and being authentic. And then on the one, it's a long time since I've talked about X and Y axes, by the way, but on the Y axis, we are talking about experience or expertise. And again, that's something that was also borne out in that previous slide where we talked about sales being educating and being informing. So but this is a diagrammatic form of why trust is important and what you can do to establish trustworthiness in your personal brand, because you're representing your company to other organizations, but they don't, but those other organizations only see you. And so if you're not trustworthy, then that will reflect on their brand, on your employer's brand. And in the same example, Sir Stuart Rose exemplified trust in that brand, and he really cared about it. And I think that's a kind of an important lesson. Okay, and the reason why it's important in sales, just in case, is that 80% of your competition, and when I talk about sales, business owners, Natalia, I feel like I'm speaking for you, Natalia. Feel free to come off and engage if you want to. I know you probably not keen on doing that, but 80% of anyway, your competition will be down the bottom of that, what's called a Zeman pyramid, Z-Y-M-A-N, and I'll be talking about this in those masterclasses quite a lot, the Zeman pyramid. They'll be in the me too. They'll be doing what everyone else does, and it's very hard to distinguish yourself if you're doing the same as everyone else. So if you're able to emphasize your authenticity, your expertise, your authority, if you like, as some people call it, especially online, your authority, then that puts you in the trusted advisor band. And that's where the customer, the moment they've got an idea coming about, wouldn't this project be a good idea? Their first thought is not, let's go to procurement and get 3 quotes. Their first thought is to phone Hardip or to phone Rebecca or Natalia and say, what do you think about this? You become their go-to person. And that is where you want to be. And I got to believe, Rebecca, that that's where Marvin's company wants you to ascend to that point, if you like. And we talked about this before as well, which is around your ability to communicate. Has anyone seen that diagram, this diagram before? Okay. It's called the Morabian diagram, MEHRABIAN, Morabian diagram. And if our communication is 100% of the experience, it breaks down like this. That the words that I speak on this sales sort of Zoom session right here, the words are only 7% of the total communications experience. 38% is my voice, which is going to go down when I want to emphasize a point, or it's going to go up when I want to ask a question of someone, and that helps that tonality, that helps the communication flow. And then 55% is on the body language. Now we're on Zoom, so fortunately you can only see from here upwards on me, and I'll make occasional hand gestures and facial gestures and things like that, and it adds to the communication experience. It adds to the transparency, and it helps us build relationships. The fact that we can see each other and engage with each other is kind of helpful. Okay, so do you, I suspect I'm the only one that's old enough to remember this. This is called, has anyone ever heard of mirroring before? Mirroring. Okay, so Natalia, tell me about that then, if you've heard of mirroring.
Yes, I do it many times.
Right, I'll come off of share now. You do it?
Yes.
Tell us a bit about that.
When you prepare yourself for, let's say, for a meeting, and you want to, as you mentioned in your discourse, you want to impress the person, you just look in the mirror and try to find the proper words, depending on what your clients need. Try to find the proper words to explain in a simple way to understand what you need to do or to achieve, or depends. So it all depends by situation.
Yeah. Excellent. So mirroring is where you're sort of putting yourself in the other person's position. What do they want to hear? So, but also extends beyond that you mirror the other person's gestures. Exactly, yes. Right. So these people, I mean, just to emphasize the point, this is, you can go on YouTube, it is a fantastic, I think they did it as a comedy sketch originally, but there's been loads of psychological studies done on this in the mid-1950s. It's, I think it's one of the Marx brothers, is it Harpo Marx on the left, and it's Lucille Ball on the right-hand side. You can YouTube it, lasts about five minutes long. It's fantastic to watch, and they basically, it's two different people, but they mirror each other's actions absolutely identical. It's really quite spooky to watch. But there's a lot of psychology in that, which has been borne out later. They did it as I say, for a comedy sketch originally. So the point of mirroring is that it aids communication flow. If you mirror, that means there are less barriers between you and the other person. If you copy their body language, not too much, because that can be
if
weird.
It's too much, it's like my two children, that they annoy one each other.
Exactly right. You sort of, and in a sort of adult environment, it would feel a bit weird, a bit creepy. Yes. Actually, and that's why if you go to these dating consultants, which I haven't been to, but I have seen on telly, they will talk about mirroring, because there's something about mirroring that is positive up to a certain point to the other person. Even in business, it builds trust. That's what I'm getting to. I won't go into all the science because I don't know all the science, but I do know that it aids trust. That if you're mirroring, and how that gets experienced by you, the reason why it's advantageous for you is that it builds that trust. The client, the prospect, will tell you more than they tell your competition. So you will find out more about the business need, more about, who the competition is, really what they want to buy, all of those really juicy bits of information that helps you put together a really high quality solution for that customer. So I spent a bit more on that than I perhaps intended, but mirroring is really important part of that process. And hopefully now that you've seen that little diagram, photo rather, then maybe you'll think about mirroring just a little bit more. Let me go back to share screen again, and I'm going to ask you to tell me what you think might be going on here. Okay. Any ideas what you think might be going on here? Is it a business setting? Is it a social setting? Is it anyone going to guess?
Can be both.
Sorry,
And a business and a social.
There is a social there.
Yeah.
And
I'm saying can be both. So it can be a social thing like in between colleagues.
Yeah.
Or can be a meeting like, but made it a bit more comfortable, including quite interview or agreement.
Hardip, you've been ever so quiet, which is I recognise you're a quiet person anyway. But have you got any thoughts? Okay, I'm going to go with no. All right. Do you think they trust each other? Because this is about trust.
Dating.
Sorry?
Look in the conversation.
Do they?
It's a bit awkward. Yeah, can be, but it's a bit awkward.
Okay, Rebecca, any thoughts?
On the picture, I think their skin looks like it's touching, and they've got a lot of eye contact going on.
Yeah. So I think there is trust that's going on there. Now, I think he wants to date more than she does, if I'm honest, because his arm is invading her personal space, and she's kind of using her right arm there. I know she's got a cup of coffee, but she's almost like pushing away, but her body's quite open at the same time. And I know they're on a sofa, so some of that is impacting on it. But in general, I would say there is trust there. There's their eyes are meeting. They're looking at each other in the eye. A very important function of building trust. I forgot to mention that. In some cultures, you shouldn't look someone else in the eyes. In the continent of Africa, in particular, that can be seen as disrespectful. Here, we are. This is okay to look people in the eyes. Again, not too much, because that can be weird as well. There's a balance, isn't there? But they're smiling, and so they're all again really important part of building a relationship, of building trust. So yes, I would say that's a net positive that's kind of going on there. What about this one on the left? Don't know how big your screen is, but on the left, what do we think is going on there?
Probably they meet up the stairs, going up and down.
Okay. Anything else? Do we trust? Any trust going on there?
Not quite. Yes, they're looking in the eyes when each other.
Yeah.
They're facing, but that's it.
So that suggests there's a level of communication going on. The person on the left, man, is standing front on, very open. Woman on the right, not so, is a little bit more closed in her body language, got her hands together, as has he actually. So it suggests an element of discomfort. One might be a manager and the other might be a direct report, might be that kind of conversation. But there's just something about that. Of course, we can't actually know because we're not there. But there's something about that that suggests there's a relatively comfortable conversation kind of going on. What about on the right? This is a photo of a networking event that's going on. What do we think? There's two groups of people here. I want to focus on this group of 4 people here. What words come to mind when you look at that group?
Work meeting.
They seem to know each other, quite comfortable with each other, but what are the clues? What are the clues where you think they're comfortable with each other?
They all look relaxed, smiling.
Thank you. They're relaxed, they're smiling. There's generally eye contact that's kind of going on. They all seem to be focused around this person here who might be a manager or someone of importance. They're all focused on it. Of course, could be, but he's just the one talking. My wife would say, give those 2 women are talking to actually and say, don't you simper up next to a man or something like that. But anyway, that seems to be something that's going on there. They're relaxed. It's also, by the way, do you go networking? Does anyone go to networking events? It's sometimes very hard to break into a group if you don't know anyone, particularly as a female. That might feel uncomfortable. This group is open. There's no one. There's a space right here to walk into, and if you smile and ask, "Can you join the conversation?" they'll likely say, "Yes, of course, you can do that." Otherwise, if it was a very sort of secret or confidential conversation, they'd all be round in a ring and closed. But that's a clue that that's a comfortable, sociable sort of conversation. You can go in there, and trust is implied there. They're looking at each other in the eyes, they're smiling. What about this conversation that's kind of going on here? That's very different, isn't it? Any ideas? There's a barrier. Let me just fast forward. There's a barrier in between, I think, in a table, but it might not be visible. You can just, I don't know why I'm pointing, you can't see that, but you can just see the bottom here, which might be a chair or a table. There's a barrier in between, which suggests they don't know each other that well, so they're not going to get too close. Anyway, made my point. It's about using trust. Gosh, time, tempus fugit, time marches on. So we've talked about trust. Everything I've tried to do in this is about building trust, building rapport, stuff like that. So can I just ask you in the chat box, or come up with me if you prefer. Yeah, Hardip, you're right on those. How do you feel, scale of 1 to 10 just now, on building trust? Has anything come across to you about, I like that, I can use that, and I can, does anything come across to you as having, give yourself a score out of 10. I probably should have asked you that at the very beginning, so I've got a baseline, but just think about that. And dump it in the text box or come off of mute and tell me about that. That'll be really helpful. Okay, so I do want to tell you about Masterclass. Rebecca, you're joining us on I pushed it out by a week because sad events of the last few days means that next Monday is a funeral. Probably not right to come back first thing the next morning and go into a fairly intense learning program. But this is where the Masterclass is coming in. I would be really grateful for if you could point me the way, or point someone my way of any, shall we say, early career, excuse me, salespeople, or people that are thinking of embarking on sales, or business owners that want to learn more about sales and selling. I'd be really grateful for a shout, and that's what I'm trying to do. That QR code will take you directly to more information about that program. Right, so the takeaways, excuse me, give me 1 second. Takeaways from trust. Smile. Smile is an instant. It says you're okay. It says we're okay. It builds trust, builds rapport, means everything's okay. Keep your word. Punctuality, being on time for meetings, presentations, things like that. Stuff happens, of course, but that's part of all the actions that we can all take to build trust between you and whomever you're talking about. And if you say you're going to do something as a follow-up action, then do it. And that's all part of trust. Is a bit of a continuous process that we're going through. And I think Warren Buffett said it can take a lifetime to build and 5 minutes to destroy. It's really that easy. And let the other person talk as well. Now, it does feel like I've done all the talking, and there's probably a decent reason for that, but I've tried to ask some open questions to encourage people to talk, and thank you very much for doing so. Not easy if you're in an office environment, I know, but asking open questions. But first of all, do we know what an open question is? I've used that without really qualifying it. Any idea what an open question is? It's a question that, sorry, Natalia.
It's a question that gives space for an answer as follow up by other questions or by other answers, depending by the people who participate in the meeting.
Encourages the other, that's right, asking open question. You can't really answer yes or no to it. If I said, yeah, okay, so you got that. So an open question leads to the other person talking some more, and that's really, and again, that's part of building rapport, building trust. Looking interested, that can be really good. So a lot of people, when they come on Zoom, we're all, just in case you're wondering, we're all fine now, but a lot of people, when they come on Zoom, forget that they're on camera as well, and you would not believe what we get to see from week on week, people doing, not realizing they're still on camera. So demonstrating competency over time, transparency when it comes to pricing, when it comes to the process that you're going to go through to get that price. Being transparent is another way of building trust. Or conversely, if, like that double glazing salesperson story I told you about earlier on, couldn't demonstrate transparency, then automatically I'm finding it a bit hard to trust them. And with time, your visibility, if you're permanently visible online to your managers, etc., whoever that is, that again, that's all being visible, building your trust index, if you like. If that's, and the other thing is, and this is an art, is don't sell too soon. Don't sell until they're ready to buy. Otherwise, your messages just won't land. Okay, right. So I would be really interested if, and again, the reason I'm doing these for free is it helps me put content together for stuff that I can charge big money for, Rebecca. So, so this has been really helpful. I've enjoyed the feedback, but are there any particular skills, especially sales skills, be it negotiation, be it LinkedIn research, whatever it happens to be, that you would really like to know more about? If you can't think of anything offhand, feel free to drop me a note, DM me, or an email or something like that, and then I'm quite keen to put together some content that kind of matches that. But for the moment, let's come off of share. We don't need to see that anymore. for the moment, I'm gonna put out an invite for this time next week, and I'll think of a subject in the meantime that we're going to do something on. Hope you join me. And has anyone got anything else they want to say or question they want to ask before we go? If not, I'm just going to say thank you very much for joining me and for testing me on a few things. That was really good to see as well. Enjoy the rest of your days. If you want links to the recording, and I know certainly Iris, who will be watching this afterwards, and Judith as well, they've asked for links to the recording. I'll send those on with the greatest of pleasure as well. So have a brilliant rest of the day. Lovely to see you. Thanks for your smiles, and have a good rest of the day. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you
You're
too.
very welcome. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.